It's the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
Yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday presented by DraftKings, America's #1 rated sportsbook app. You know why it's a Wisdom Wednesday? Because we get the wisdom of Andrew Brandt. The guy went to Stanford undergrad. He got his law degree somewhere. I'm not remembering where he got his law degree right now for some reason. That's a major miss by me. But what I do know is an unbelievable job writing a column for the MMQB. He is an advisor to the agents at Vayner Sports. Obviously, former long-time VP of Player Finance for the Green Bay Packers, host of the Business of Sports podcast. We'll get to Andrew momentarily. A lot of questions for him about Tua time, among other things. We also will have a new Spread the Word winner later on this week. Please, it's the easiest contest to enter. We really appreciate those of you that just engage in any way with any of the posts I post about the show at Ross Tucker NFL, or Brian and intern Casey at RossTuckerPod. So if you're not already, please follow, please engage, a like, a reply, a retweet. It all helps. Sponsor confirmation email winner. Keep them coming, especially those DraftKings. They got an awesome offer this week. Keep them coming. I've got some really cool press passes now to give out. Buffalo Bills against the Chiefs. I'll have Eagles Giants after tomorrow night. So get them in. Ross at RossTucker.com to enter. We have not had a lot of people entering as of late. New patron to shout out Mario Tremblay. Patreon.com/RT Media. We're getting like 2 or 3 patrons a day at this point. I think you guys want to find out why all of our other Tuckheads love it so much. B, I think it's pretty clear people want to be able to see all of our bets on the Even Money podcast, the Friday picks, the press box grades, power rankings, all of it in written form, as opposed to having to write everything down and always just remember it all listening to the show. So very, very cool. Almost as cool as Andrew Brandt. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, Andrew, already kind of gave you the intro, but before we get into Tua time in Miami, because there's a lot there that I want to get into with you. And I should mention, follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Brandt. I know you have an interesting Business of Sports podcast this week that I'm looking forward to listening to. I wanted to give you a chance to plug it today.
Yeah, good day, Ross. You know, Paul Rabel is more than an athlete in a lot of ways. He's one of the best lacrosse players in the world. I mean, you can make an argument that he is the best or has been in the past. But he's an entrepreneur, and he's always had that bent, and he created a league after being a superstar in the National Lacrosse League and the lacrosse league that plays in the winter, that plays in the spring. He is now owner, investor, player, etc. for the Premier Lacrosse League, which has played for 2 years, a barnstorming league that goes to a different venue every site. Tomorrow, our Thursday, is PLL Day, 2 years to today that they started playing. So I had Paul on. We talked about his path. We talked about his career. We talked about lacrosse. We talked about the entrepreneurial spirit of lacrosse fans and more about sports business. So I hope you like it. Paul Rabel on this week's podcast.
You know, I don't know if we ever talked about this, Andrew, but 3 of my 4 years, I think, at Princeton, definitely 2, but I think 3 of my 4 years at Princeton, they won the national championship in lacrosse. So I went from growing up in Reading, Pennsylvania, where I knew nothing about lacrosse other than it was on Memorial Day on TV on ESPN, to going to Princeton, where it was a really big deal. My freshman year, we won it. My senior year, we won it. I can't remember if we won it our sophomore or junior year, but it was a really, really big deal. Fun sport. I think it's a better sport than baseball, to be honest with you. I wish my high school had it. I probably would have tried it in the spring. Also, Andrew, I'm forgetting, where did you go to law school?
Went to Georgetown Law.
That's right.
Back home in D.C. And speaking of D.C., Paul and me are from those suburbs. And I went to a little school in Bethesda, Maryland called Landon School for Boys. He went to a bigger private school called DeMatha, which has produced so many NBA players back in the day, Adrian Dantley and Kenny Carr, and also produced a mutual friend of all of ours named Brian Westbrook, who was, I think, the same years as Paul. So, yeah, there's a local connection there.
So a couple funny things there. First of all, one of my best friends from college went to Landon. We probably talked about that, but Dave Crater went to college. We were fraternity brothers, teammates, the whole deal. So I'm very familiar with Landon. And then DeMatha, I'll never forget one time talking with Josh Wilson, a DB that went to Maryland that was maybe a second-round pick for Washington, had a nice NFL career, 10 years or so. And we were at one of these NFL functions, Andrew, and he went to DeMatha.
Yeah.
And somebody said to him, "Did you play basketball for DeMatha?" And I think he maybe said, I can't remember. I think he said, "Yeah." They said, "Did you start?" He said, "No." He said, "If you start for us, you're like pretty much going to the NBA." He's like, if you start for they've had so many guys. Like, if you start for us, you're going to the NBA. He's like, "No, I'm 5'11". I was playing, I was coming off the bench or whatever. So very, very funny. All right, so let's get into this, Andrew. And by the way, check out Business of Sports. Sounds awesome. Let's get into this, Andrew, with the decision in Miami to go with Tua Tagovailoa, to announce him as the starter yesterday. Blank canvas, your reaction?
I think they had. I haven't watched the games like you probably have. Fitzpatrick seems to be playing well, and they seem to be doing well, above expectation, 3-3, in good shape in that division, and they make the move. I think that, as I said, maybe there was a feeling like, okay, bye week, we go to them. And the other point of what I'm going to say, you give me a blank canvas, I'm always going to say this. The days, I go back to my experience, I've talked about it 100 times, the days of sitting a quarterback 3 years with Aaron Rodgers, I stake in the ground, will never, ever happen again, ever. And I'm saying first-round quarterback will ever sit for that long. The longest since, of course, has been Pat Mahomes for 1 year, but even that was an anomaly. Now, I know they don't end up behind Hall of Famers like Brett Favre, but back to the Packers, I don't think Jordan Love will sit 3 years. He might sit more than 1 year, which would be big in itself, but this is what happens. And I guess if I'm running a team, Ross, I don't know if I pay a placeholder, right? The Tyrod Taylors, the Ryan Fitzpatricks, the Josh McCowns, the Sam Bradfords for Josh Rosen. I don't even know if I do that, because you're going to get them out there probably by October. So what are you doing paying $10, $15 million? I'm just, it's just so when I think about the business of sports and trying to allocate resources, if you take a first-round quarterback, what are you doing with a placeholder? Like, unless it is like a Brett Favre, like, why are they doing that? So I guess my thoughts always go to, it's great that Ryan Fitzpatrick is still playing well, but why not get Tua out there for 5 more games of getting his feet wet? That's my thought.
Well, and Tua is obviously unique, I think, a little bit, Andrew, coming off the injury. What I think is interesting, to your point, I guess, is the way they did this. I think on one hand, you could argue they're putting Tua in a good position to succeed because the team's playing pretty well.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you could argue they're kind of putting him in a tough spot in the sense that the team's 3-3. They've won back-to-back games by double digits. They're a game out in the AFC East. It's kind of awkward timing, because if there's a drop-off in play and a noticeable drop-off at the quarterback position, that's a tough sell, I think, to the veterans out there that feel like they got a shot this year.
Yeah, it's a good point. The problem with playing a rookie quarterback early is what if after a veteran's been in there, especially like you said, have done pretty well, is like, okay, what if he stinks? you know, what if he stinks? What do you do then? And if you're Miami management, putting myself in those shoes, you can't pull him. You can't bring back Fitzpatrick after a bad couple of games. What does that do? So now you put Fitzpatrick in a consulting kind of just a mentor role instead of a playing role. And I don't know how you go back on that other than injury, which of course we don't fear for anyone. We don't want for anyone. But you're right. It's kind of a no-win situation now. You're all in. It was like what happened with Tyrod Taylor. Even if Justin Herbert stunk, they're not going back to Taylor, and hopefully he's better and feeling any effects of that unfortunate injury. So, yeah, I mean, here we go. We talked about it the year where Mayfield and Darnold and Rosen and Allen and Lamar Jackson all played by Halloween. So here we go again. They're in, and the outlier is going to be Jordan Love, of course.
It's interesting too, Andrew, and I want to get one last question in on this from a Business of Sports podcast or Business of Sports perspective. I just think a lot of these teams think the real value now is when these guys are on their rookie contract and trying to extract that value. How important is that? Is we got this guy on the cheap compared to what he'll eventually get and other guys are getting. Let's maximize the return and the value we're getting by playing him as a rookie.
Yeah, and again, I didn't experience this because this rookie thing came in 2011. But I see your point. And listen, it's not only the rookie deals. It's what you said, I guess. It's getting more of the rookie deals. Because if you sit him a year, you've got 2 years of the rookie deal before you have the ability to renegotiate. And then the media pressure is you got to renegotiate like they did for Goff and Wentz and everyone. But if you get them in their rookie year, now you get 3 years of where you can tell the agent, from my perspective, hey, CBA, we can't even renegotiate. So if he's making $1 million, I'm sorry, don't blame us, blame your union. So there you go. And I think that's a good point you raise, where now if Tua starts now, you get over 2.5 years of money that you can't even raise, even if you wanted to.
Two other topics I definitely want to get to with you, Andrew, and see if you have any experience with it. Now we've got, I guess, multiple Cowboys players anonymously bashing the coaching staff. Do you ever have to deal with that? I know it's probably more of a coaching angle, but do you ever have anonymous issues during your time in the NFL and have any insight into, how we get to this point and what you do from here?
Never had this, Ross, and it's personal with me, obviously, because I know McCarthy and I hired McCarthy, part of the group that hired him. And I can say we didn't have that kind of thing they're talking about with 3 months with McCarthy when I was there 15 or 13 years with him. So no, what I did have were issues with assistant coaches where players did not either respect them or listen to them, or there was insubordination. And one quick story, I had a player that just didn't like his assistant coach. He was a veteran player. He was probably the same age or even a year older maybe than the assistant. And there was insubordination. And the assistant coach was saying, I can't coach him. The player was saying, I can't learn from him. And I may have told you this before, I had an intervention in my office where I had the coach and I had the player. And I put down 2 chairs and I said, listen, we're not firing him, the coach. We're not releasing him, the player. Work it out. And basically sat there while they stared at each other for 2 minutes that seemed like 2 hours. until they started griping, and then it didn't, come to a hug and kumbaya, but they got along, they worked it out, and they understood each other, and we made it work. And of course, that was a temporary solution. The assistant coach ended up being released that end of that year.
Oh, man. What about the trade requests, Andrew? I've seen where David Njoku for the Browns reportedly asked for a trade. John Ross, wide receiver for the Bengals. How did you deal with that? How often did that happen, and how did you typically deal with those, especially in-season trade requests?
Yeah, I think more I've dealt with the ones that were like, can we seek a trade due to money, due to not getting a contract? And then you look at the agent and you say, well, listen, we want to keep him here. It's just something we're going to have to deal with after the season, and you try to work through it. These cases sound like players that aren't getting play time and are buried on the bench and want a new scenario, a new scenery. But my thought is you just lose all leverage. If they're going to get something for Njoku or John Ross, there it goes, because now it's out there. And if I'm a GM getting a call about one of those, I can say something like, okay, wait till you cut them, or we'll give you the ham sandwich trade, a conditional 7th 2 years from now. Not a lot of trade value, but you're right. It's going to be something I have to work through. And this is where you rely, when there are always issues, you rely on the agent. And it's funny, I just told that story. You rely on the position coach to try to smooth things over and just say, we're going with these other guys. You hope it doesn't rise, as you said, to the general manager or the management level where you have to get involved. You try to keep that within the team.
Any thoughts, Andrew, on either the Packers' loss to the Bucs or the Eagles being down to 2 total starters on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I'm hoping as a fan, and I'm unabashedly a biased Packer fan, that it's just an aberration on what looks like a really good year. And we'll see. We'll see how they respond with the Texans this weekend. The Eagles, I'm biased as well. They're kind of my number 2 team, as you know. And yeah, listen, take your favorite team, listeners, and now you have backups at every position but center. How's your quarterback doing? Think about it that way. And in my bias, Ross, I have said since the beginning of the season, no matter how bad they're losing games, and they're only losing by a couple points, that they'll win the NFC East. And that is proving more prescient every time we watch the Cowboys, isn't it? And last thought on the Cowboys, again, the toys, Ross, I get CeeDee Lamb's great, but they have spent money and resources at receiver and running back. It's proven time and time again, they're not where you spend your money. Those are not positions that will give you the bang for the buck, and it's proving out again.
Check out the Business of Sports podcast. It is absolutely excellent, and follow him on social media at Andrew Brandt. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Ross.
Speaking of business, I've mentioned this to you guys before. I've got a few small businesses, not even forget the media stuff for a second, but Go Big Recruiting, myfrontpagestory.com, RT Media, which is the podcast business. It's not easy. That running a business is tough. If you guys own a business or help run a business, not easy. Don't let QuickBooks and spreadsheets slow you down anymore. It's time to upgrade to NetSuite. There's no reason to pay for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need all in one place instantaneously. So whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite. There's over 22,000 companies on NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/Tucker. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/Tucker. That's netsuite.com/Tucker.
Tuck's Takes.
Good morning, Ross. Let's start with the decision in Miami. You and Andrew obviously covered it. Anything else that you want to add to the Dolphins going to Tua time?
Well, so I can offer two different perspectives, Bri. First, Brian Flores was in New England when I was there as a player, but he was in the front office. He was an executive, he was a scout. So he is able to see the big picture. And I think he looks at this and says, you know what? We're trying to win Super Bowls here. And it's not about maybe competing for the AFC East or a wild card spot. We're looking at Baltimore, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Tennessee. We want to be one of the top 5 teams in our conference and a chance to go to Super Bowl. And Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the guy that can get us there. So the sooner we start playing him, the closer the step we take to that point. And I also think on some level, he wanted the team to be in a good place before he inserted Tua in the lineup. The flip side is, if you're a veteran player, you're feeling pretty good about things right now. You love Fitz. You're 3-3. You think you got a chance to win the AFC East. And now you're thinking, oh, man, I don't know how Tua's going to do. He's probably not going to be as good as Fitz. And so that kind of stinks. I think it's really important that Tua gets off to a good start. Otherwise, you're going to have some disappointed veterans in Miami, to be sure.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, let's talk about those anonymous quotes from the Dallas Cowboys, which are always fun.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it seem like there are certain organizations where this happens more often? The Washington football team, the Jets, the Browns, and yes, the Cowboys. Seems like the Cowboys are this kind of team. I think it's really pathetic because if you saw, I guess a couple players said something to Jane Slater of NFL Network about the assistant coaches don't know what they're doing and blah, blah, blah. So much for personal accountability. So much for personal responsibility. It's a really bad look for Mike McCarthy, really bad look for the coaching staff, but a really bad look for the players too.
Tuck's Takes.
What about the trade requests of tight end David Njoku in Cleveland and wide receiver John Ross in Cincinnati? Your thoughts?
So I do like that these are at least about opportunity and not about money. Now, let's be honest. It's about more opportunity so they can get more money. But that's okay. These guys are both high picks that aren't getting a lot of playing time. And so they're voicing, that they'd like to be traded. And I think the teams are probably open to it if they feel like they're getting value in return for these guys that were high picks for them. Neither one of them plays all that much, so it makes sense. And I think they probably did it behind closed doors. You probably want it to only be behind closed doors, but maybe they're feeling like, I don't know if this is if this is going to happen. So they needed to shake the trees a little bit. I really don't mind it. I don't love when it gets public, but I think they feel like that's their best chance to leave and go somewhere else. Although it just makes it kind of hard to go somewhere else in the middle of the year at those positions and contribute immediately anyway.
Tuck's Takes.
Finally, you've got former Cowboys defensive lineman David Irving signing with the Raiders. And not sure we mentioned about Tennessee Titans Taylor Lewan officially suffering a torn ACL on Sunday's game against the Houston Texans.
That's a bummer. I enjoy watching Taylor Lewan play. He's got a fun personality too, and the Titans are playing really well. Ty Sambrailo has gotten better than, his first couple of years in Atlanta. He really struggled, even though he was a second-round pick. I think he's gotten better. I think he's serviceable now, but he's not Taylor Lewan. As for David Irving, remember David Irving's the guy that said, I don't need football. I don't care that, he got suspended again by the NFL. He said, I don't care. I don't feel like playing anymore. Those guys usually come back. And I'm not saying he ran out of money, but when he realizes what the other side's like. Maybe try to get a real job. I don't know. It's, you know what? I think I'd rather be making a lot of money to play football. That seems like a better usage of my life skills than whatever else I was going to try to do. Let me go back and try to play again. Hey, football fans, are you an Amazon Prime member? Did you know you can watch Thursday Night Football live on Prime Video? It's the future of football. Catch all the action on any device, almost anywhere in the world. You could choose your favorite announcer, including Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, or Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah, or Chris Long and Kerry Champion from NFL Next. Get next-gen stats and watch in-game replays on demand, all within Prime Video's X-Ray. Next-gen stats are real-time stats, powered by AWS. No more waiting around. You can access the current stats anytime. Need to check out your fantasy players doing? This is the ideal way to stay up to speed. In-game on-demand replays are accessible on your remote on Fire TV or by turning your mobile device sideways. So if you're a streamer or simply want the most custom way of watching Thursday Night Football, tune in live every Thursday starting October 8th. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. and kickoff is at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. Also available on Fox and NFL Network. NFL Network simulcast subject to change. Thursday Night Football is presented by Bud Light Platinum. Let's get to an email question, Bri.
Ever wanted to ask an NFL player a question? Well, here's your chance. It's time to Ask Ross.
Dude, I'm just telling you guys right now, if you don't ever subscribe to the YouTube page or check it out, you're missing out. You know, that Amazon read I just did, that's pre-produced because I guess they wanted to approve it. So while we play that, you know, for audio, for people who listen to podcasts, you don't know any different. But for the YouTube folks, you got to see what Brian and I did today during the Amazon pre-produced. That was funny. YouTube.com/RossTuckerNFL. You can always, by the way, send me an email, ross@rosstucker.com, and ask me any question you'd like. If you take advantage of one of our sponsors first, I guarantee to read and respond to it on the show, which I love. So please, I mean, you can take advantage of any of our sponsors, even the NetSuite. That's just a free trial. I mean, that's just a free demo. That's an easy one to do the free demo and then go ahead and send me a question. What do you got, Brian?
This question today is from a longtime listener, Kevin Nieto. Hey, Ross. Again, longtime listener, lifelong Buccaneers fan. Like you, I felt the Bucs got a raw deal from the officials on that Thursday night game. My question to you is, what, if anything, could a team do to protest or contest an officiating crew's performance? I know they can be sanctioned and suspended, but can a team do anything to expedite or intensify that process? Can a team protect a crew's assignment to a particular protest a crew's assignment to a particular game? The more I think about the game, the more inexplicable those calls become. Bucs hurt themselves too, but the refs ensured those self-inflicted wounds were insurmountable. Thanks, Ross. Love what you do.
Good question. Really good question, Kevin. And what I would tell you is there is a process whereby after the game, every NFL team submits every call that they either want clarity on or felt like the officials got wrong. So that happens after every game. And typically, you'll hear back a couple days later. Here's why we called that on this one. On this other one, you were right. We shouldn't have called that. We made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, it doesn't really amount to anything, Kevin. You know what I mean? Like, it almost makes you feel worse when they admit they were wrong because, like, well, that doesn't help me a whole lot now. I mean, it gives you satisfaction because I've had them come back and say that wasn't really a trip, Ross. It wasn't really a hold, whatever. And I'm like, well, that stinks because everybody watching on TV thought it was, heard my name get called out. My mom, my wife. They cannot protest a crew's assignment moving forward. And you're not supposed to tell the media when the NFL admits to mistakes. That's a faux pas. and you could get fined for that. Good question. Really good question. Shout outs today, Pizza Boy Brewing, DynastyFreaks.com, Sporticulture, SteakhouseSports.com, Vision Comics with an X, which Tuckheads Jay tells me is very, very cool. Speaking of cool, College Draft Podcast already posted. Fantasy Feast Part 1 later today. GC, Greg Cosell tomorrow. You guys know the deal on Amazon, the homepage at RossTucker.com, rating and reviewing the show. Any of those things you do, I count as being able to ask me a question and potentially winning one of these press passes. I think we're done here.
Thanks for listening to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Fantasy Feast, Even Money, Business of Sports, and College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, RossTucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.